The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth of southwestern Kansas in the summer of 1878, and Sarah Mitchell felt every degree of that heat radiating through her worn cotton dress as she gripped the wooden handles of the plow, her 6 months pregnant belly making the work nearly impossible. But she had no choice because her husband had died 3 months ago from typhoid fever, and their 3-year-old daughter Emma needed to eat. The mule brayed in protest as Sarah stumbled over a clump of hardened dirt, nearly losing her grip on the plow handles. Sweat poured down her face, stinging her eyes, and she could feel the baby shifting uncomfortably inside her womb. Her back screamed in agony, her swollen ankles throbbed with each step, and her hands were raw and blistered from the rough wood. But she pushed forward because stopping meant failure, and failure meant losing the small homestead that James had worked so hard to claim before his death. Emma sat in the shade of the small soddy house at the edge of the field, playing with corn husk dolls that Sarah had fashioned for her. The little girl's blonde hair shimmered in the sunlight, reminding Sarah so painfully of James that sometimes she had to look away. But she could not afford to dwell on grief. The wheat needed to be planted if they were to have any hope of surviving the winter, and the neighbor who had promised to help had taken sick himself. Sarah had made it perhaps 20 yards further when a wave of dizziness overtook her. The world tilted sideways, and she felt her knees beginning to buckle. She clutched the plow handles tighter, trying to steady herself, but her vision was swimming with dark spots. "Ma'am, what in God's name do you think you are doing?" The voice cut through the haze in her mind, masculine and rough, but edged with genuine concern. Sarah blinked hard, trying to focus on the figure approaching on horseback. Through her blurred vision, she could make out a tall man dismounting from a sorrel mare, his broad-brimmed hat shadowing his face. "I am working my field," Sarah said, her voice coming out far weaker than she intended. "Please, I do not need charity." The man was beside her now, and she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His eyes were a striking blue-gray like storm clouds over the prairie, and they were fixed on her with an expression that mixed disbelief with anger. "Charity?" He practically growled the word. "Ma'am, you are going to kill yourself and that baby if you keep this up. Let go of that plow right now." "I cannot," Sarah insisted, even as another wave of dizziness made her sway. "The wheat needs to be planted, and I have no one else to do it." Without another word, the stranger reached out and gently but firmly removed her hands from the plow handles. His touch was warm and solid, and Sarah found she did not have the strength to resist. The moment she let go, her legs gave out entirely, but he caught her before she hit the ground, one strong arm supporting her back while the other steadied her elbow. "Easy now," he said, his voice softer this time. "When did you last eat?" Sarah tried to remember. She had given Emma the last of the cornbread that morning, and before that there had been thin broth the night before. "I am fine," she said, but even to her own ears it sounded like a lie. "You are not fine. You are half-starved and working yourself to death." He guided her toward the shade of a scraggly cottonwood tree at the edge of the field. "Sit down before you fall down." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could manage on her own, but the truth was that she was grateful for the intervention. She sank down onto the sparse grass beneath the tree, leaning back against the trunk. The stranger walked back to his horse and retrieved a canteen and a cloth bundle from his saddlebag. "Drink this slowly," he instructed, handing her the canteen, "and eat something." The water was cool and clean, better than the somewhat brackish well water from her own property. Sarah took small sips, savoring each one. The cloth bundle contained biscuits and dried beef, and her stomach clenched with hunger at the sight, but she shook her head. "My daughter needs it more than I do," she said. The stranger's jaw tightened. "There is plenty for both of you, and you will not be any good to your daughter if you collapse in that field." He turned and looked toward the soddy, where Emma had noticed the commotion and was watching with wide, cautious eyes. "That your little one?" "Yes." "Emma, she is 3." He nodded slowly, then looked back at Sarah, his gaze moving to her rounded belly. And you have another on the way. Where is your husband, ma'am? Because if he is letting you work a plow in your condition, he and I are going to have words. The familiar ache of loss rose in Sarah's chest. My husband died 3 months ago. Typhoid fever swept through these parts in the spring. It took him and 7 others. The stranger's expression softened immediately, the anger draining away to be replaced by sympathy. I am sorry for your loss, ma'am. That is a heavy burden to carry. He was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. My name is Jack Hartley. I have been working on a ranch about 15 miles north of here, but the owner sold the place last week. I was riding through looking for new work when I saw you out in that field. Sarah Mitchell, she replied. And I appreciate your concern, Mr. Hartley, but I cannot pay you for help. I barely have enough to feed Emma and myself until the wheat comes in, assuming I can get it planted. Jack shook his head. I was not asking for payment. What I was thinking is that you need help, and I need a place to stay while I look for steady work. I could help you get your crops planted and make some repairs around here. In return, you give me meals and a place to sleep. Could be the barn or even just the porch. I'm not particular. Sarah stared at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motives. She had heard stories of women alone on homesteads being taken advantage of, but there was something genuine in Jack Hartley's eyes, something honest. And the truth was, she desperately needed help. The barn has a loft, she said finally. It is not much, but it is dry and out of the wind. That will do just fine. Jack stood and extended his hand to help her up. Now let me take you and your daughter into the house. You need to rest. I will get started on that field. Mr. Hartley, I cannot just sit idle while you work. You can and you will, he said firmly, but not unkindly. At least for today. You are exhausted, and that baby needs you to take care of yourself. Tomorrow, if you're feeling stronger, you can help with lighter tasks, but the heavy work is mine from now on, understood? There was something commanding in his tone that reminded Sarah of her father, who had been an army sergeant before settling in Missouri. It was the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but it was also laced with genuine care. She found herself nodding. Jack helped her to her feet and guided her slowly toward the soddy. Emma watched them approach, clutching her corn husk dolls tightly. When they got close, Sarah knelt down, ignoring the protest from her back. Emma, sweetheart, this is Mr. Hartley. He's going to help us with the farm for a while. Emma regarded Jack with solemn brown eyes. Are you going to be my new papa? The question hung in the air, achingly innocent and heartbreaking. Sarah felt her eyes sting with tears. No, honey. Mr. Hartley is just a friend who is going to help us. Remember, Papa is in heaven with the angels. Jack crouched down to Emma's level, his expression gentle. Your mama is right, little miss, but I promise I will take good care of both of you while I am here. And I bet you are a very good helper, are you not? Emma nodded shyly. I can feed the chickens. That is an important job, Jack said seriously. A farm cannot run without someone to feed the chickens. The little girl smiled, warming to him, and Sarah felt something in her chest loosen just slightly. She led them inside the soddy, which was small and dim but clean. There was a rope bed in one corner where Sarah and Emma slept, a small table with 2 chairs, a trunk containing their meager belongings, and a cooking area with a cast iron stove that James had purchased just before he fell ill. Jack looked around, taking inventory. You have got good bones here. Solid construction. I will shore up that wall where the sod is crumbling, and I noticed the roof could use some patching before the fall rains come. Mr. Hartley, I told you I cannot pay you. And I told you I'm not asking for payment. And now sit down and eat something, both of you. He handed the biscuits and dried beef to Emma, who looked at her mother for permission. Sarah nodded, and Emma immediately tore into the food with the enthusiasm of a hungry child. Jack left them to eat while he went back outside. Through the small window, Sarah watched him unhitch the mule from the plow and lead it to the small lean-to that served as a barn. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew his way around animals and farm work. Then he returned to the field, took up the plow handles, and began working. Sarah ate slowly, her body gradually reviving with food and water. Emma chattered beside her, already constructing elaborate stories about Mr. Hartley and his horse. Sarah only half listened, her attention drawn repeatedly to the window and the man working her field. Jack Hartley was a mystery. Men did not simply appear and offer help without wanting something in return, not in her experience, but he had asked for nothing except basic room and board, and he was out there right now doing the back-breaking work that had nearly destroyed her. She did not know whether to be grateful or suspicious, so she settled on cautiously hopeful. The afternoon wore on, and Sarah found herself dozing in the chair, lulled by the food in her belly and the rhythmic sound of the plow cutting through earth. When she woke, the sun was lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Emma was asleep on the bed, curled up with her dolls. And through the window, Sarah could see that Jack had made significant progress on the field, more than she could have accomplished in 3 days of work. She stood slowly, her body still aching, but no longer on the verge of collapse. Moving to the stove, she assessed what she had to work with. There was cornmeal, some salt pork, a few potatoes, and a precious jar of preserved tomatoes. It was not much, but she could make a decent stew. Sarah set to work, finding comfort in the familiar tasks of cooking. She diced the salt pork and potatoes, added water and the tomatoes, and set the pot on the stove to simmer. The smell filled the small, soddy, rich, and savory, and she realized it had been a long time since she had cooked a proper meal. As the sun began to set, Jack came to the door, knocking gently despite the fact that the door was already ajar. "Ma'am, I am going to see to my horse and bed down in the barn. I will be back in the morning to continue with the field." "Mr. Hartley, please come in. I have made supper, and you have more than earned a meal." He hesitated, clearly not wanting to impose, but Sarah could see the hunger in his eyes. He was likely just as hungry as she had been. "If you are sure, ma'am." "I am sure, and please call me Sarah. We are past formalities if you are staying here." "Only if you call me Jack." He removed his hat as he entered, and Sarah noticed he had washed his face and hands at the pump outside. His dark hair was damp and curling slightly from the water. They ate together at the small table, Emma between them, chattering away about her day and asking Jack 100 questions about his horse, whose name was Copper. Jack answered each question patiently, his manner easy and warm with the little girl. Sarah found herself watching him, noting the way he smiled when Emma said something particularly amusing, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners. He was handsome, she realized with a start. Not in the refined way that James had been, with his neat beard and careful manners. Jack was rougher, more weather-worn, but there was something appealing in his strength and capability. Sarah immediately felt guilty for the thought. James had only been gone 3 months. It was far too soon to notice another man, let alone feel any sort of attraction. After supper, Jack thanked her sincerely for the meal and retreated to the barn. Sarah cleaned up, got Emma ready for bed, and then lay down herself, her body sinking into the thin mattress with relief. Through the window, she could see lamplight in the barn loft, and she wondered what Jack was doing up there, what he was thinking. Sleep came slowly, her mind turning over the events of the day. Jack Hartley had appeared like something out of a fairy tale, arriving at the exact moment she needed help most desperately. She wanted to believe it was providence, a sign that perhaps things would get better. But life had taught her to be cautious about trusting in miracles. The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of hammering. She rose and looked out to see Jack already at work repairing the sagging barn door. Emma was still asleep beside her, so Sarah dressed quietly and stepped outside. The dawn air was cool and fresh, a relief from the heat that would build as the day wore on. Jack looked up from his work and nodded a greeting. "Morning, Sarah. I hope I did not wake you." "You did, but I needed to be up anyway. The chickens need feeding, and I should start breakfast." Emma told me that feeding the chickens is her job, Jack said with a small smile. Maybe let her do that when she wakes up. As for breakfast, I do not expect you to cook for me every day. I can manage on my own. Nonsense. You are working for your keep, and that includes meals. Besides, it is no harder to cook for 3 than for 2. Jack looked like he wanted to argue, but he simply nodded. Then I thank you. That stew last night was the best meal I have had in weeks. Sarah felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. She returned to the soddy and began preparing breakfast, making a larger batch of cornmeal mush than usual and frying up some of the salt pork. When Emma woke, Sarah sent her out to feed the chickens, and the little girl went happily, stopping to watch Jack work for a few minutes before continuing to the chicken coop. They fell into a routine over the following days. Jack worked tirelessly, finishing the plowing and then moving on to the planting. He repaired the barn, patched the roof of the soddy, and fixed the pump that had been giving Sarah trouble for weeks. In the evenings, they shared meals, and afterward, Jack would sometimes whittle small toys for Emma while Sarah mended clothes or worked on other chores. Sarah found herself looking forward to those evenings more than she wanted to admit. Jack was easy company, with a quiet sense of humor and a wealth of stories from his years working ranches across Kansas and Colorado. He never pried into her past or asked uncomfortable questions, but he was always willing to listen when she wanted to talk about James or her worries about the future. One evening, about 2 weeks after Jack's arrival, they were sitting on the porch after Emma had gone to bed. The night was clear and cool. The stars spread across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Sarah had been mending one of Emma's dresses, but she set it aside, her eyes drawn to the vast expanse above. James used to say the stars were holes in the floor of heaven, she said softly. He said the light was shining through from the glory beyond. Jack was quiet for a moment. That is a beautiful thought. He was good at beautiful thoughts. He was a teacher back in Missouri before we came west. He loved books and poetry and music. Sarah smiled sadly. He was not built for this kind of life, honestly, but he wanted to give us a fresh start, a place of our own. And he tried so hard. He must have loved you very much. He did, and I loved him. We married young. I was 18 and he was 22. My father did not approve. He thought James was too soft, too impractical. But I saw his kindness and his gentle heart, and I thought that was enough. She paused, swallowing hard. I still think it was enough. We had 7 good years together. I would not trade them for anything. Jack nodded, his gaze on the horizon. I understand. My parents had that kind of love. They homesteaded in Illinois before the war. My father was killed at Shiloh in '62 and my mother never remarried. She said he was her one great love, and she did not need another. She passed 5 years ago, and I have been drifting ever since, I suppose. No siblings? I had a younger sister, but she died of cholera when she was 10. It was just me and my mother after that. His voice was matter-of-fact, but Sarah could hear the old grief beneath it. I'm sorry, Jack. That's a lot of loss for one person to carry. He shrugged. We all carry something. That's just part of being alive. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. But I want you to know, Sarah, that what you are doing here, keeping this place going for your daughter while carrying another child, that takes more courage than most men I have known possess. Your husband would be proud of you. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. Some days I am not sure I have any courage left. Then it is good you do not have to do it alone right now. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something electric and unspoken. Sarah felt her breath catch, felt an awareness of Jack that went beyond simple gratitude. She saw him truly for the first time, not just as the man who had rescued her from her desperate situation, but as a man, a good, kind, strong man who made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since James died. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. She looked away quickly, picking up her mending again with trembling hands. It is getting late. I should turn in. If Jack noticed her sudden nervousness, he did not comment on it. He simply nodded and said goodnight, waiting until she had gone inside before heading to the barn himself. Sarah lay awake for a long time that night, her hand resting on her belly where the baby was moving actively. She felt guilty for the warmth that had spread through her chest when Jack looked at her, guilty for even thinking about another man when she still mourned her husband. But at the same time, she could not deny the feeling. Jack had become important to her, more important than she had intended to allow. The summer days grew longer and hotter. The wheat that Jack had planted began to sprout, green shoots pushing up through the dark earth. Sarah's belly grew larger, the baby becoming more active as she entered her 7th month of pregnancy. Jack took over more and more of the heavy work, insisting that Sarah rest and focus on preparing for the baby's arrival. One afternoon in late July, Sarah was in the soddy, sorting through the few baby clothes she had saved from Emma's infancy when she heard raised voices outside. She moved to the window and saw 3 men on horseback confronting Jack, who had been working on building a new chicken coop. Sarah's heart began to pound. The men looked rough, with the hard eyes and casual violence of those who lived on the wrong side of the law. One of them, a lanky man with a scar across his cheek, was leaning forward in his saddle, speaking to Jack in a tone that was clearly threatening. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed the rifle that hung above the door. It was old, and she was not even sure it was loaded, but it was all she had. She stepped outside, the rifle held firmly in her hands despite their shaking. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. The scarred man turned to look at her, his eyes traveling over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "No problem, ma'am. We were just telling your hired man here that Mr. Dalton, who owns the ranch to the north, is looking for his property. Seems the sorrel mare matching his horse there went missing a few weeks back." Sarah's eyes flew to Jack, whose expression was carefully neutral. "That horse is mine," he said evenly. "I bought her fair and square in Dodge City 2 months ago. I have the bill of sale in my saddlebag if you care to see it." "Now see, that is interesting," another man spoke up. This one shorter and heavier. "Because Mr. Dalton's mare went missing about 2 months ago." "Then perhaps Mr. Dalton should be more careful about his stock. As I said, I bought copper from a horse trader in Dodge. If she was stolen before that, it is not my concern. I am a legal owner." The scarred man's expression hardened. Mr. Dalton does not see it that way. He wants his horse back, and he is not particular about how he gets her. "You can tell Mr. Dalton that if he wants to dispute my ownership, he can take it up with the law in Dodge City, but he is not taking my horse." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah stepped forward, raising the rifle slightly. "I think you gentlemen should leave now. You are trespassing on my property." The scarred man laughed, though there was no humor in it. "That little pea shooter does not scare us, lady, but we will leave. For now. You tell your man there that Mr. Dalton is not the forgiving sort. He will be back for what is his." The 3 men turned their horses and rode off, but not before the scarred man shot one more menacing look back at Jack. Sarah lowered the rifle, her hands shaking so badly now that she nearly dropped it. Jack was at her side in an instant, taking the gun from her and setting it aside. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. "I am fine. I am more concerned about you, Jack. Is that horse stolen?" He met her gaze directly. "I bought copper legally with money I earned working an honest job. The bill of sale is real, and it is in order. If that horse was stolen before I bought her, I had no way of knowing it. But I will not let some rich rancher intimidate me into giving up my property just because he thinks he can bully people." Sarah believed him. There was no deception in his eyes, no hesitation in his voice. But these men, this Mr. Dalton, they could come back. They could hurt you, or worse. "I can handle myself, Sarah. I have dealt with men like that before." He paused, his hands still on her shoulders, warm and solid. "But I understand if you want me to leave. I will not bring trouble to your door." "Leave?" Sarah felt a surge of panic at the thought. "No, Jack, I do not want you to leave. I just want you to be safe. We need you here. Emma and I, we need you." The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than she had intended. Jack's expression softened, and one hand moved from her shoulder to gently cup her cheek. "Sarah," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She did not know who moved first. Perhaps they both did. But suddenly his lips were on hers, gentle but insistent, and she was kissing him back, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss was everything she had not known she was craving: warmth and connection, and a promise of something more. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah felt dizzy with a mixture of desire and guilt. "Jack, I should not have done that. James has only been gone 4 months. "I know," Jack said, though he had not let go of her. "And if you think it is too soon, I will respect that. But Sarah, I need you to know that what I feel for you is not just gratitude or convenience. These past weeks, getting to know you and Emma, being part of something that feels like a family again, it has meant more to me than I can say. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and I am falling in love with you." Sarah's breath caught. Part of her wanted to pull away, to insist that it was too soon, that her heart still belonged to James. But another part, a part that was growing stronger by the second, recognized the truth in his words. She had been falling in love with Jack too, even as she tried to deny it to herself. "I do not know if I am ready," she whispered. "I loved James. I still love him in a way. But you are right. What I feel for you is real, and it scares me." "Then we will take it slow," Jack said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "There is no rush. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah, not unless you tell me to." She leaned into him, letting herself take comfort in his strength. "I do not want you to go. I want you to stay, for as long as you are willing." "Then I will stay." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, until Emma's voice called from inside the soddy, asking for water. They separated reluctantly, and Sarah went to tend to her daughter, but she could feel Jack's eyes on her, warm and full of promise. That night, as Sarah lay in bed with Emma asleep beside her, she allowed herself to imagine a future. Not the bleak, desperate future she had envisioned after James's death, but something brighter. A future with Jack, working the land together, raising Emma and the new baby, and maybe even more children. A future filled with love and partnership and the quiet joys of a life built together. It felt like a betrayal of James at first, but as she thought about it more, she realized that James would want this for her. He had loved her, and he would want her to be happy, to have someone to share her life with. He would want Emma to have a father figure, and the new baby to grow up with a man to call Papa. The next few weeks were tense. True to the scarred man's word, Mr. Dalton's men came back twice more, each time making increasingly aggressive demands for copper. Jack refused to back down, and Sarah stood by him, though fear gnawed at her constantly. She had heard stories of what men like Dalton did to those who crossed them, and she was terrified of losing Jack just as she was beginning to open her heart to him. Finally, Jack made a decision. "I am going to ride to Dodge City and speak with the marshal. I will bring my bill of sale and have him verify it. If Dalton has a legitimate claim, let him prove it through legal means, but I will not be intimidated." "Jack, it is a 2-day ride to Dodge. What if something happens to you?" "Nothing is going to happen to me, but I need to settle this, Sarah. I will not live under the threat of Dalton's men coming here and frightening you and Emma." He took her hands in his thumbs rubbing gently over her knuckles. "I will be back in 4 days, 5 at most. Can you manage that long?" Sarah did not want him to go, but she understood his reasoning. "We will be fine. Just promise me you will be careful." "I promise." He pulled her close, kissing her deeply, and Sarah clung to him, memorizing the feel of him, the smell of him, the way his heart beat steady and strong beneath her palms. Jack left the next morning, riding out just after dawn. Sarah and Emma watched him go, and then Sarah threw herself into work to distract from her worry. She harvested vegetables from the small garden, preserved what she could, and prepared the soddy for the baby's arrival. which she estimated was now only about 6 weeks away. The first 2 days passed without incident. On the third day, in the late afternoon, Sarah was outside hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. Her heart leapt, hoping it was Jack returning early, but her relief turned to dread when she saw it was Dalton's men again. All 3 of them, plus 2 more she had not seen before. Sarah immediately called for Emma to get inside and stay there. The little girl obeyed, sensing her mother's fear. Sarah positioned herself in front of the door, her hand on the rifle that she had made sure to load properly after their last visit. The scarred man dismounted, his expression ugly. "Where is your hired man, ma'am?" "He's not here," Sarah said, keeping her voice as steady as she could, "and I must ask you to leave my property." "Not until we get what we came for. If he's not here, then we will take the horse and be on our way." "That horse is not yours to take. Mr. Hartley has a legal bill of sale." "We do not care about pieces of paper, lady. That horse belongs to Mr. Dalton, and he wants it back." The scarred man took a step forward, and Sarah raised the rifle. "Stop right there. I will shoot if I have to." The man laughed. "You are not going to shoot anybody. You are just a pregnant woman trying to protect a horse thief." He took another step, and Sarah pulled back the hammer on the rifle. The click loud in the tense silence. "I said stop." Something in her voice must have convinced him that she was serious because he paused, but his expression grew darker. "You are making a big mistake, lady. Mr. Dalton does not take kindly to people who cross him. And I do not take kindly to people who threaten me on my own land. Now leave." There was a long, tense standoff. Sarah's arms were beginning to shake from holding the rifle steady, and she could feel the baby moving restlessly inside her. Finally, the scarred man spat on the ground and remounted his horse. "This is not over," he said. "You tell your man when he gets back that he better watch his back, and you better watch yours too." They rode off, and Sarah stood there until they were out of sight, then sank down onto the porch steps, the rifle sliding from her nerveless fingers. She was shaking all over, adrenaline and fear coursing through her body. Emma crept out from inside and wrapped her small arms around Sarah's neck. "Mama, are the bad men gone?" "Yes, baby, they are gone." Sarah held her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, trying to calm her racing heart. Jack returned late the next afternoon, and Sarah nearly wept with relief when she saw him riding up to the soddy. She ran out to meet him, as much as a woman in her 8th month of pregnancy could run, and he dismounted quickly, catching her in his arms. "What is wrong? What happened?" he demanded, seeing the fear in her eyes. Sarah told him about Dalton's men and their threats. Jack's expression grew thunderous, his jaw clenching with barely controlled rage. "I should never have left you alone if they had hurt you or Emma, but they did not. I managed them. And now you are back, and you can tell me what happened in Dodge." Jack's expression cleared slightly. "I spoke with Marshal Earp. He verified my bill of sale and confirmed that the trader I bought copper from is legitimate. He sent a telegram to Mr. Dalton, informing him that I am the legal owner of the horse and that any further harassment will result in legal action. Dalton may be a big rancher, but even he cannot ignore a federal marshal." "So it is over?" "It should be. If Dalton or his men come around again, we report them to the marshal, and they will face consequences." Sarah sagged with relief, leaning into Jack's solid presence. "I am so glad you are back. These past few days I have been so worried. I am sorry I left you, but I am here now, and I am not leaving again." He pulled back slightly, looking down at her belly. "How is the baby?" "Active. I think he or she is running out of room in there." Jack's hand came to rest gently on her stomach, and Sarah felt the baby kick against his palm. His face lit up with wonder. "That is incredible. I have never felt that before." "Would you like to be there? When the baby comes, I mean?" He looked up at her, surprise and something deeper in his eyes. "Are you sure? That is usually women's work." "I am sure. I want you there, Jack. You have become so important to me, to us. It feels right for you to be part of this." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise sealed between them. Then I will be there, for this and for everything else. Sarah, when the time is right, when you are ready, I want to marry you. I want to be a husband to you and a father to Emma and this baby and any others we might have. I know it is fast, and I know you may not be ready yet, but I needed you to know my intentions. Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were good tears. Tears of hope and happiness. I think I am ready. Jack, I think I have been ready for a while, but was too afraid to admit it. I love you. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love you too, Sarah, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other, and Sarah felt a peace settle over her that she had not felt in months. The future was still uncertain in many ways, but she knew now that she would not face it alone. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Sarah's life. She and Jack were openly affectionate now, no longer hiding their feelings. Emma took to calling Jack Papa Jack, which made him smile every time. They made plans for the future, talking late into the night about expanding the farm, maybe getting some cattle, building a larger house when they could afford it. True to Jack's prediction, Dalton's men did not return. Word apparently got around that the marshal was watching the situation, and even Dalton was not bold enough to risk federal intervention. Sarah's due date approached rapidly. She had arranged for a midwife from the nearest town, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, to come stay with them when the time came. But babies had their own schedules, and Sarah went into labor 2 weeks earlier than expected in the middle of the night. She woke to cramping pain and dampness, realizing her water had broken. She shook Jack awake where he had been sleeping on a pallet on the floor. They had agreed it was improper for him to share her bed until they were married, though both of them chafed at the restriction. Jack, the baby is coming. You need to ride to town and fetch Mrs. Henderson. Jack was on his feet, instantly pulling on his boots. How far apart are the pains? I do not know. That was the first one, I think. Then I have time. I will ride as fast as I can. He paused to kiss her forehead. You're going to be fine. You have done this before. But not alone. Last time I had James and my mother-in-law and 3 other women helping. You are not alone. Emma is here, and I will be back with Mrs. Henderson as soon as I possibly can. He rode out into the darkness, pushing copper hard. Sarah tried to stay calm, focusing on breathing through the contractions as they came, slowly at first and then with increasing frequency. Emma woke up, frightened by her mother's obvious distress, and Sarah did her best to reassure her while also preparing what she would need for the birth. The hours crawled by. Dawn came, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The contractions were coming fast now, and Sarah knew the baby would not wait much longer. She was beginning to panic, wondering if Jack had made it to town, if Mrs. Henderson would arrive in time, when she heard horses outside. Jack burst through the door, followed by a stout, gray-haired woman carrying a large bag. Mrs. Henderson took one look at Sarah and immediately took charge, sending Jack to boil water and keep Emma occupied while she examined her patient. You are moving along quickly, dear. This baby is eager to meet the world. Have you been having strong pains? Yes, Sarah gasped out between contractions. They are very close together now. Then we do not have much time. Let us get you comfortable. What followed was a blur of pain and effort. Mrs. Henderson was efficient and calm, guiding Sarah through each contraction, encouraging her to push when the time came. Jack stayed nearby, just outside the main room, but close enough that Sarah could hear his voice when he spoke to Emma, keeping the little girl calm and distracted. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few hours, Sarah felt the baby slip free, and then there was the most beautiful sound in the world. A newborn's cry, loud and healthy and strong. It is a boy, Mrs. Henderson announced, holding up the squalling infant. A fine, healthy boy. Sarah reached out with trembling arms, and Mrs. Henderson placed the baby on her chest. He was red and wrinkled and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at him. This miracle, this gift. "Can Jack come in?" she asked Mrs. Henderson, who was busy with the afterbirth and cleaning up. "In just a moment, dear. Let me get you and the baby tidied up first." Once Sarah was settled and the baby was cleaned and wrapped in a soft blanket, Mrs. Henderson opened the door and beckoned Jack inside. He entered slowly, his eyes going immediately to Sarah and the bundle in her arms. His expression was one of awe and tenderness. "Come meet your son," Sarah said softly, and Jack came to kneel beside the bed, looking down at the baby's tiny face. "He is perfect," Jack whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What are you going to name him?" Sarah had thought about this a lot over the past weeks. She wanted to honor James in some way, but she also wanted to acknowledge the new future she was building with Jack. "I was thinking James Jackson Mitchell. We could call him Jackson, or maybe Jack Jr., if that's all right with you." Jack looked at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You would do that? Name him after me? You are going to be his father in every way that matters. It feels right." Jack leaned forward and kissed her, careful not to jostle the baby. "Thank you, Sarah. That means more to me than you could know." Emma was allowed in next, scrambling up onto the bed to peer at her new brother. "He is so small," she said wonderingly, reaching out a tentative finger to touch his hand. The baby's tiny fingers closed around hers, and Emma giggled with delight. "He likes me." "Of course he likes you. You are his big sister. You're going to teach him so many things." The day passed in a haze of exhaustion and joy. Mrs. Henderson stayed for 2 days to make sure Sarah was recovering properly and to help with the baby. Jack was attentive and helpful, bringing Sarah whatever she needed, taking care of Emma, and gazing at baby Jackson with an expression of wonder whenever he thought no one was looking. On the 3rd day after Jackson's birth, when Mrs. Henderson had returned to town and Sarah was feeling stronger, Jack brought up the subject of marriage again. They were sitting together on the bed, Jackson sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms while Emma played outside in the yard. "I know we have only known each other for 2 months," Jack said, "but Sarah, I do not want to wait. I want to make this official. I want you to be my wife, and I want to be a legal father to Emma and Jackson. Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at him, at this good man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most, a man who had worked tirelessly to help her keep her home, who had stood by her against threats and danger, who looked at her children with genuine love. Her heart was full to bursting. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Jack, I will marry you." He kissed her then, long and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. They were married 2 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the church in the nearest town. Emma stood beside them, holding a bouquet of wildflowers that Jack had picked that morning, and Sarah held baby Jackson, who slept through the entire proceeding. The circuit preacher who performed the ceremony was a kindly older man who seemed genuinely happy for them. Afterward, they rode back to the farm, officially a family now. Jack carried Sarah over the threshold of the soddy, making her laugh, and then they spent the evening together, talking and planning and simply enjoying being together. That night, for the first time, Jack joined Sarah in the rope bed. Emma was sleeping soundly on the pallet they had set up for her, and Jackson was in the wooden cradle that Jack had built. Sarah was nervous, her body still recovering from childbirth, but Jack was patient and gentle. "We do not have to do anything tonight," he murmured against her hair. "I am content just to hold you." "I want to," Sarah whispered back. "Maybe not everything, not yet, but I want to be close to you. I want to feel like your wife." They made love slowly and carefully, Jack attentive to her needs and her comfort. It was different from her experiences with James, more passionate and less tentative, but it felt right in its own way. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Sarah felt a contentment she had not known she was missing. "I love you, Mrs. Hartley," Jack said, and Sarah smiled at the sound of her new name. I love you too. The months that followed were busy and productive. The wheat crop came in better than Sarah had dared hope, providing enough income to see them comfortably through the winter. Jack worked tirelessly to improve the farm, building a proper chicken coop, expanding the barn, and even starting work on a larger house that would give them more room as the family grew. Emma thrived under Jack's attention, following him around the farm and learning everything he would teach her. Jackson grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and seemed particularly fascinated by his father. Sarah watched her family with a heart full of gratitude, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. Winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow, but the soddy was snug and warm, and they had plenty of provisions stored up. On long winter evenings, Jack would read to them from the few books they owned, or tell stories of his adventures working ranches across the West. Emma would sit enraptured, and Sarah would nurse Jackson and simply enjoy the peaceful domesticity of it all. One evening in February, as they sat by the fire after the children were asleep, Jack turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "I have been thinking," he said. "This farm is good, but it is small. We have been making it work, but if we want to truly prosper, if we want to give Emma and Jackson and any other children we might have a real future, we need to expand." "What did you have in mind?" "I have some money saved from my years of working. Not a lot, but enough to buy some cattle. If we could increase our herd over the next few years, we could sell beef along with wheat. It would give us more security, more options, more." Sarah considered this. It made sense, though it would mean more work and more risk. But she trusted Jack's judgment. "How many cattle are we talking about?" "To start, maybe 10 or 15 head. We could let them graze on the open range and bring them in when needed. Over time, we could build up to a decent herd." "And you know how to manage cattle?" Jack nodded. "I have been working cattle ranches since I was 16. I know the business." "Then let us do it. We are partners in this, Jack. If you think it is the right move, I trust you." His smile was brilliant. "We are going to build something great here, Sarah. I can feel it." And they did. Over the following years, the Hartley farm grew and prospered. They expanded their land holdings, bought cattle, and built a large, comfortable house with real wooden floors and glass windows. Jack proved to be an excellent rancher and farmer, and Sarah managed the household and helped with the accounts, her education serving her well. Emma grew into a bright, capable girl who could ride and rope as well as any boy her age. Jackson became a sturdy toddler and then a lively little boy, always getting into mischief, but with a smile that could charm anyone. And in the spring of 1880, Sarah gave birth to another child, a daughter they named Rose, who had Jack's blue-gray eyes and Sarah's blonde hair. Jack was in the room for Rose's birth just as he had been for Jackson's, holding Sarah's hand and encouraging her through every contraction. Afterward, as he held his daughter for the first time, his eyes were wet with tears. "She is beautiful," he said, "just like her mother." "You're going to spoil her terribly," Sarah teased, but she was smiling. "Probably," Jack admitted without shame. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and failed crops, the constant worries that came with farming and ranching. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each passing year. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jack took Sarah into town for a rare day without the children, leaving Emma in charge of her younger siblings with a neighbor woman checking in periodically. They had dinner at the town's small restaurant and then walked together through the streets, hand in hand. "Do you remember the day we met?" Jack asked as they watched the sun set over the prairie. "How could I forget? I thought I was going to die in that field, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had been too proud to say out loud. I knew the moment I saw you that you were special. You were so fierce, so determined, even when you were about to collapse. I fell in love with you right then, I think, though it took me a while to admit it to myself." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so frightened of loving you at first, it felt like a betrayal of James. But now I understand that love is not a finite resource. I can honor what I had with James while also celebrating what I have with you. You did not replace him. You gave me a new beginning. That is all I ever wanted to be for you, a new beginning, a partner, a future. They stood there in the fading light, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built a life together through hard work, determination, and love. By 1885, the Hartley farm was one of the most prosperous in the region. They had over 100 head of cattle, extensive wheat fields, and a reputation for fair dealing that brought them regular customers. Jack had become a respected voice in local matters, occasionally serving on town councils and helping to mediate disputes between neighbors. Sarah had also become an important figure in the community, known for her generosity and wisdom. When neighboring families faced hardship, she was often the first to arrive with food and practical help. She had not forgotten what it felt like to be desperate and alone, and she was determined to help others avoid that fate if she could. Emma, now 13, was growing into a lovely young woman with her mother's compassion and her stepfather's strength. She had never known any father but Jack, and the bond between them was deep and true. Jackson, at 7, was a bright boy who loved books as much as he loved working with the cattle, inheriting both James's intellectual curiosity and Jack's practical skills. And little Rose, at 5, was indeed as spoiled as Sarah had predicted, but also sweet-natured and affectionate. One evening in the summer of 1885, the whole family was gathered on the porch of their house watching the stars come out. Jack had his arm around Sarah, Rose was dozing in her lap, and Emma and Jackson were arguing good-naturedly about something Sarah was not quite paying attention to. "Are you happy?" Jack asked her quietly, his lips close to her ear. Sarah looked around at her family, at the house they had built, at the land they had cultivated, at the life they had created from nothing but determination and love. She thought about that day 7 years ago when she had been plowing a field while pregnant and on the verge of collapse, when Jack had ridden up and taken the reins from her hands, scolding her gently for working too hard. That moment had changed everything. It had been the beginning of a love story that had transformed both their lives, that had created this beautiful, chaotic, wonderful family. "Yes," she said, turning to kiss him softly, "I am happy, more than I ever imagined I could be." "Good," Jack said, pulling her closer, "because I plan on spending the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." And he did. Over the years that followed, the Hartley family continued to grow and thrive. In 1888, Sarah gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Grace. Jack joked that they now had enough children to run the ranch entirely with family labor, though Sarah swatted him affectionately for the comment. Emma married a young rancher from a neighboring property in 1891 in a beautiful ceremony that had Sarah crying happy tears throughout. Jack walked Emma down the aisle with obvious pride, and Sarah heard him tell Emma that she would always be his first daughter, no matter what. Emma's husband was a good man, hardworking and honest, and Jack approved of him wholeheartedly. Jackson grew up to be a scholar, eventually attending a college back east, but he always came home for summers and holidays, never forgetting his roots. He brought his learning back to the ranch, introducing new techniques and ideas that helped the family business continue to prosper. Rose, as predicted, was the most spoiled of the children, but she also had a gift with animals that none of the others possessed. She could gentle the wildest horse, calm the most skittish cow, and seemed to have an instinctive understanding of what creatures needed. She eventually took over the primary management of the cattle herd, working side by side with her father. The twins were still young as the 19th century drew to a close, but they were already showing distinct personalities. Daniel was adventurous and fearless, while Grace was thoughtful and artistic, always drawing pictures of the ranch and the prairie. Through it all, Jack and Sarah's love remained the foundation on which everything else was built. They had their disagreements, of course, and there were difficult times. There was the year that drought nearly destroyed their wheat crop, and the winter that a blizzard killed a quarter of their cattle. There was the scare when Rose fell from a horse and broke her arm, and the long weeks when Jackson was sick with pneumonia. But they faced everything together, their partnership tested and proven time and again. They grew older together, gray creeping into their hair, lines deepening around their eyes from years of squinting into the sun and smiling at each other. But their attraction never faded. Jack still looked at Sarah like she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and Sarah still felt her heart quicken when he walked into a room. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1896, Jack surprised Sarah with a trip to Denver. They left the children with Emma and her husband and took the train to the city, staying in a real hotel with electricity and running water. They went to the theater and fancy restaurants, and Jack bought Sarah a beautiful brooch that she treasured. On their last night in Denver, as they stood on the balcony of their hotel room looking out at the glittering city lights, Jack took Sarah's hand and kissed it gently. 20 years, he said. It feels like both a lifetime and no time at all. I know what you mean, Sarah replied. Sometimes I still feel like that desperate woman in the field, and you are the cowboy who rode up to save me. You saved yourself, Sarah. I just helped with the plow. She laughed. You did a bit more than that. Maybe. But you were the one with the courage to let me in, to take a chance on a drifter who showed up out of nowhere. You could have sent me away, but you trusted me. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. You gave me everything. And you gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that life could be good again, that I could love again. You gave me our children and our life together. We gave each other everything, Jack. That is what partnership means. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood there under the stars, just as they had so many times before on their own porch back home. But whether they were in Denver or on the prairie, it did not matter. They were together, and that was all that counted. They returned home to find the ranch running smoothly under the children's capable care. Life settled back into its familiar rhythms, the endless cycle of seasons and work and family that defined their existence. But Sarah never took any of it for granted. She had known what it was like to lose everything, and she treasured every moment of the life she and Jack had built. In 1900, as the new century dawned, the Hartley family gathered for a photograph in front of their house. Jack and Sarah stood in the center, surrounded by their children and their growing number of grandchildren. Emma's first child, a son named James after Sarah's first husband, was 2 years old and sat on Jack's lap. Jackson had recently gotten engaged to a school teacher from Denver. Rose was 20, beautiful and confident, already turning away suitors who did not meet her high standards. And the twins, now 12, stood on either side of their parents, looking like younger versions of Jack and Sarah. The photographer captured them all, frozen in that moment of happiness and prosperity. Sarah looked at Jack as the flash went off, and he looked back at her, and the love that passed between them was as strong as it had ever been. That evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Sarah and Jack sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. Sarah's hair was silver now, and Jack's face was weathered from decades of outdoor work. But to each other, they were still the young people who had found each other in a moment of desperation and turned it into a lifetime of love. Do you ever think about that day? Sarah asked, knowing Jack would understand what she meant. Every day, he replied. I think about how close I came to just riding past, to not stopping. What if I had been in a hurry? What if I had not looked over and seen you? Our entire life together hung on that one moment. I think we were meant to find each other, Sarah said. I do not know if I believe in fate exactly, but I believe that some things are meant to be. You and me, we were meant to be. I know we were. I have never doubted it. Not for a single day. He squeezed her hand, his thumb rubbing gently over her knuckles in the same gesture he had used for 20 years. I love you, Sarah Hartley. I will love you until my last breath. And if there is anything beyond this life, I will love you there too. And I love you. Jack, thank you for taking the reins that day. Thank you for scolding me gently and insisting I rest. Thank you for staying and building this life with me. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge. The vast prairie sky above them filled with infinite possibilities, just as their lives had been filled with more joy than either of them had dared to dream possible. on that hot summer day in 1878, when a desperate woman plowing a field had been saved by a cowboy with a kind heart. As the years continued to pass, Jack and Sarah grew old together with grace and gratitude. They celebrated every milestone, every grandchild born, every achievement of their children. They weathered losses too, as life inevitably brings. But through it all, their love remained constant, an anchor in the changing tides of life. In 1905, on a crisp autumn evening, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with their entire extended family. The ranch was now a sprawling operation, run primarily by Rose and the twins, with Jackson providing advice and Emma's husband managing some of the business affairs. Jack and Sarah had stepped back from the day-to-day work, content to offer guidance when asked, but mostly enjoying their later years together. At the anniversary celebration, Emma stood up to give a toast. "I was only 3 when Jack came into our lives," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I do not remember my birth father, though my mother has told me many wonderful things about him. But Jack is the father I grew up with, the man who taught me to ride and work cattle, who bandaged my scrapes and scared away my nightmares, and more importantly, he loved my mother with a devotion I have tried to emulate in my own marriage. Together they built something remarkable. Not just this ranch, but a family filled with love and laughter, and the kind of strength that comes from facing life's challenges together. I am so grateful to call them my parents." There was not a dry eye in the room as Emma sat down. Jack pulled Sarah close, and she leaned her head on his shoulder, overwhelmed by the love surrounding them. "We did all right, did we not?" Jack whispered to her. "We did better than all right. We did wonderfully." As the party continued around them, with music and dancing and the happy chatter of multiple generations, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that desperate day in the field to this moment of celebration and joy, every step had been worth it. The hardships, the sorrows, the struggles, all of it had led to this beautiful, abundant life. She thought about the woman she had been, widowed and pregnant and terrified, certain she would lose everything. And she thought about the cowboy who had ridden up and gently but firmly taken over, refusing to let her destroy herself trying to do the impossible alone. That moment of intervention had been the first of countless moments of partnership, of mutual support and shared dreams. Jack caught her looking at him and smiled. The same smile that had first made her heart flutter all those years ago. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Hartley?" "I am thinking about how lucky I am, how lucky we both are." "The luckiest," he agreed, and kissed her softly, not caring that they were surrounded by their family, all of whom were used to their parents' open affection. The celebration went on late into the night, but eventually the guests departed, and Jack and Sarah were left alone in the house that had seen so much life, so much love. They prepared for bed slowly, comfortable in the routines they had established over 3 decades of marriage. As they lay together in the darkness, Sarah thought about the future. They were both in their 60s now, and she knew they did not have forever, but she was not afraid. Whatever time they had left, they would spend it together. And when the time came for one of them to leave, the other would have the memories and the family they had created to provide comfort. "Jack," she said softly. "Yes, love? If you could go back and change anything, would you?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Not a single thing. Every choice, every moment, every hardship and joy, it all led to us, to this life. I would not change any of it." "Neither would I. Not even the hard parts." "Especially not the hard parts. Those taught us how strong we are, how much we can endure when we do it together." Sarah turned to face him in the darkness, tracing the familiar planes of his face with her fingers. "I hope I go first," she said, voicing a thought that had been on her mind lately. "I do not think I could bear to be without you." "Do not talk like that," Jack said, though his voice was gentle. "We have years yet. And whoever goes first, the other will carry on, because that is what we do. We endure. We love. We keep going." You are right. I'm sorry. I'm just feeling sentimental tonight. You are allowed to be sentimental on our anniversary. He pulled her close, her head resting on his chest, his heart beating steady and strong beneath her ear. But Sarah, listen to me. Whether we have 2 years or 20 more, I want you to know that you made my life worth living. Before I met you, I was just drifting, working ranch to ranch with no real purpose. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to build something, to matter. You and our children are my legacy, and I could not be prouder of what we have accomplished. You were never just drifting, Jack. You were on your way to me. You just did not know it yet. He chuckled softly. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was always meant to end up on that road, on that day, at exactly the right moment to see you in that field. They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, content and secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious, a love that had not only survived but thrived through decades of real life with all its complications and challenges. The following years were kind to them. They remained healthy and active well into their 70s, enjoying their grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under the next generation's management, and Jack and Sarah took pleasure in knowing their legacy was secure. In the summer of 1912, Jack and Sarah took one last trip together, returning to the area where they had first met. The small soddy where Sarah had lived was long gone, replaced by a larger homestead occupied by a young family. But they stood on the hill overlooking what had been Sarah's wheat field, now part of a much larger operation. It looked different back then, Sarah said, her voice wistful. Smaller, more desperate. Everything looks different through the lens of time, Jack replied, but the bones of it are the same. This land, this sky, this prairie that brought us together. They stood there for a long moment, remembering. Sarah could almost see herself as she had been, young and pregnant and terrified, struggling with a plow that was too heavy for her. And she could see Jack as he had been riding up on Copper, dismounting with concern etched on his handsome face. "Thank you for stopping," she said, as she had said so many times over the years. "Thank you for letting me stay," he replied, as he always did. It was a ritual between them, this exchange, a way of honoring the moment that had changed both their lives. They held hands as they walked back to the wagon, both of them feeling the aches and pains of age but not caring. They had each other, and that was enough. Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1915 at the age of 77. Sarah was with him, holding his hand, and the last thing he said to her was, "I love you." She whispered it back, and then he was gone, his face peaceful and content. Sarah mourned him deeply, but she did not fall apart as she once feared she might. She had their children and grandchildren surrounding her with love, and she had 40 years of memories to sustain her. She lived in the big house on the ranch, spending her days tending her garden, reading and telling stories to the great-grandchildren who visited regularly. She often sat on the porch in the evenings looking out at the prairie, and she could feel Jack's presence beside her. She would talk to him sometimes, telling him about the family, about the ranch, about the changes she saw in the world, and she felt certain that somehow, somewhere, he was listening. Sarah lived for 3 more years, remaining sharp and engaged until the end. She passed away in her sleep in the autumn of 1918, at the age of 81. Her last words, spoken to Emma, who was sitting with her, were, "Tell Jack I am on my way. Tell him to wait for me." They buried her beside Jack on a hill overlooking the ranch, under 2 cottonwood trees that they had planted together decades earlier. The whole family gathered for the funeral, 3 generations united in their grief and their love for the remarkable woman who had been the heart of their family. At the reception afterward, Emma stood up to speak. She was 63 now, a grandmother herself, but in her voice was the echo of the 3-year-old girl who had watched a cowboy take the plow from her mother's hands all those years ago. "My mother was the strongest person I ever knew," Emma said. "She survived loss and hardship that would have destroyed many people. And my father my stepfather, who was really just my father in every way that mattered, he was her perfect partner. Together, they built something that will last long after we are all gone. This ranch, this family, the love they showed us all, that is their legacy. And it is a legacy we should all be proud to carry forward. The family raised their glasses in a toast, celebrating not just Sarah and Jack's lives, but the love story that had made it all possible. A love that began with a simple act of kindness, a cowboy taking the reins from an exhausted woman and scolding her gently to take better care of herself. A love that grew through shared hardship and mutual respect into something deep and enduring. A love that created a family and a legacy that would echo through generations. As the sun set over the prairie that evening, casting everything in shades of gold and amber, it seemed fitting. Sarah and Jack's love had been like that sunset, beautiful, transformative, and eternal. And though they were gone, their story lived on in every member of the family they had created, in every acre of land they had cultivated, in every value they had instilled. It was a love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, tested by hardship, and proven through decades of devotion. And it all began on a hot summer day in 1878, when a cowboy saw a woman who needed help and decided to stop. That one decision, that one moment of compassion, had changed everything. The ranch continued for many generations after, always keeping the memory of Jack and Sarah alive. Their story was told and retold, becoming family legend. The descendants who worked the land knew they were carrying on something precious, something built on a foundation of true love and genuine partnership. And sometimes on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across the prairie, people swore they could see two figures standing on the hill by the cottonwood trees, hand in hand, watching over the land and family they loved. Whether it was real or simply the power of memory and love, no one could say for certain. But it brought comfort to know that somewhere, somehow, Jack and Sarah were still together, their love transcending even death itself. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a life fully lived. From desperate beginnings to a triumphant end, from a woman plowing a field while carrying her second child to a cowboy who took the reins and scolded gently, their tale was one of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of love. It was everything a love story should be, heartfelt, honest, and utterly true to the spirit of the Wild West where it all began.